Greetings out there in YouTube land and welcome to today's video. Seems like the moment I ship out a repaired amp, two more show up out in the front yard, and this is one of them. Massive box, close to 50 pounds and too heavy for your old uncle to lift up onto the workbench. So let's open it up on the floor and see what we've got. Well, this amp is certainly well boxed. There's all sorts of padding all the way around it, except curiously for one side here. Let's hope that one wasn't the one that got kicked. Okay, so let's go ahead and start extracting all this. I see we have a letter hopefully advising us of the specific ailments that we can expect on the patient in the second box. Well, lo and behold, in that second box was a really nice looking original Silverface Fender Bassman. I believe it's from 1963. The serial number is A3. Looks great. We've got a letter here explaining everything that's wrong with it and a capacitor set that was purchased for it. So it looks like things should go very well here. I also wanted to draw to your attention a packing material that the owner used. We took plastic bags and then put more plastic bags inside to give a really nice way of protecting the amplifier. It's not like styrofoam that's going to break up or those air-filled bubbles that are going to burst. It's, I think, really a great way to pack. I've never seen that before. Okay, let's take a look at the letter and see what we're going to have to do with this. Well, it's rather lengthy and there's no need to go over all of it. Let's hit the high points. Bought in the mid-80s, where it was probably about 10 years old, for $100. Man, were those the days. Along with a 2x15 cabinet. Wow. Says the external speaker jack was missing, but the amp worked fine. The faceplate is really beat up. We'll take a look in a few minutes. Aside from some pots being replaced, it looks like it hasn't been tampered with. Okay, I used it for a couple years and it developed a really loud 120 cycle hum. Those of you familiar with my video on this subject know that the only place that can arise is from the power supply and probably a result of incomplete filtering by the filter caps. I opened it up, found a broken 350 volt. That's probably one of the two reservoir caps that are 70 microfarad at 350, and they're put in series, so they end up being 35 microfarads at 700 volts. We'll see. But it was broken. He was going to rewire it, and then he thought twice about that, and I don't blame him. He bought a set of capacitors for it with the intention of doing the work himself, but then decided maybe it'd be better to turn it over to someone else. Okay, so specifically this is what we need to do. Replace the missing external speaker jack. That should be no trouble. Replace the power cord with a 3-prong grounded cord. No problem at all. Definitely possible. Reconnect the yellow wire. That'll be fun to figure out where it was supposed to go. And finally, replace all the capacitors needed to eliminate the hum and restore the amp to proper working order. Okay, well that all seems real straightforward. So let's first take a close look at this amp, like we always do, externally, and then we'll go internal and see what we find. Let's take a quick look here at the capacitor kit that came with it. It's a set of all the electrolytics needed for the power supply, as well as the power supply resistors. Notice that they're the metal film resistors, and like a 2-watt, pretty stout, and a pretty nice set. They're from Studio Sound Electronics, amprepairparts.com, Clearwater, Florida. So hopefully this will be all that we need for the power supply. They're ruby caps, if you're wondering. Okay, so now let's take a close external look at the amp and then proceed to open it up. Well, the amp comes from North Carolina, where it's probably a lot more humid than it is out here in the Southwest. We see some rust and actually no corrosion at all on these bands. These look to be in much better shape than the little epaulettes here on the side of the handle. Top looks clean. Looks like we've got a cigarette burn or two. Hopefully not from the owner. Now let's take a good look at the front plate. And you can see that, yes, it is. There's a clear coating they put on these aluminum plates, and it clouds up and flakes up and all over time, and it sure does get kind of nasty looking. So we'll keep an eye out for a replacement front control plate here for him. I'm wondering if you laid this thing down and sprayed it with clear lacquer, if it wouldn't just melt all that back into a nice smooth finish. If I get another one of the plates and this one's off and we got nothing to lose, I'll try it. If it works, I'll let you know. Looks to me like the grill cloth might have been changed here. It seems kind of loose and lumpy on the front. The front panel itself is a little loose. It's not the end of the world, but this just doesn't have that really tight look like it came from the factory. Not the end of the world, though. Well, things look quite nice on the inside. Look how shiny that output transformer is. It almost makes you suspicious it looks so nice, but then again, the doghouse looks just the same. Missing one tube shield. I'm sure I've got one in stock here. Notice all these heavy transformers. I think when the amp takes a hit on the side during shipment, those things shift and kind of bend in the direction of impact. Massive power transformer. We've got some ARS tubes. Now they call these output tubes 5881/6L6GC, which makes it sound like they're equivalent, but they aren't at all. If you look, 5881s operate at a much lower plate voltage, plate current, and plate dissipation than the mighty 6L6GCs. So what I would say is that this tube is most likely a 6L6GC, and therefore it will work just fine as a 5881. But the other way around would not be appropriate. If you plug a 5881 into a circuit intended for 6L6GCs, I don't think they're going to last very long. Okay, just something to think about. Oh, also we see the 2-wire power cord. You know darn well that wasn't original. It almost looks like it was spliced on to the original cord right here. Of course, we'll put in a 3-wire cord. Alrighty, so that's it. Let's get that chassis out of the cabinet. Good Lord, I had to put on my sunglasses just to look at this. Looks like it's been chrome plated. It's beautiful. It must have been polished. I'm sure the owner, probably in his letter, he says, I polished the chassis and I didn't read it, but look at that. That's, I'd say, the cleanest, nicest Bassman chassis I've ever laid eyes on. It's gorgeous. Okay, let's remove the tubes and check them out. Then we'll remove the doghouse cover, see what our filter caps look like, and then we'll flip it over, put it in our nice adjustable stand, and take a look at the circuit. Let's take a look at the preamp and phase inverter tubes. These are in order the way they came out. American 7025, so far so good. Unmarked tube in the second position. Number 3 is a 12AX7 for the third position, and fourth is a 7025. Now that should be a 12AT7, which the unmarked tube may be, but as you can see, these two should be right here, this one should be there, and this should be a 12AT7. I can use my tube tester to see if it is a 12AT7. A lot of guesswork, or I can just pull one off the shelf and put it in place here. That might be the best bet. Okay, and the output tubes are the wafer-based ARS 6L6 5881s, and I already commented on those. Okay, let's take a look at the original filter cap. Remember, we were told one came loose. Well, it sure did. And you can see where the owner tried to solder this back, but look at that extrusion there. These are just completely shot. Okay, these are begging to be replaced. He did the right thing. He ordered a replacement set, and then, not feeling completely confident about changing them, he did another right thing, and that was to get some help. Okay, so that's what we're here for. So we're going to replace all of these. and all of these with the parts here that came, that he ordered. Okay, I'll get these out in a few minutes, so we'll take a look at them. Everything else seems fine. It definitely is the right output transformer, filter choke, and power transformer. This thing is just beautiful. Great shape. Okay, let's flip it over and put it into our fabulous adjustable chassis stand. Okay, here's the chassis stand. Now, everybody asked me about this in the last video, and I featured this, receiving this a few videos ago. It was sent by a very generous and kind viewer who built this, and then I guess he went on and came up with a second design he liked better, so he sent this one to me. I removed the terry cloth from the portions here that hold the chassis and put in some of that, it looks sort of like a running board rubber that has the channels in it. So I just thought that was a little more professional looking. So there it is, and you can just loosen this knob, and we're going to adjust it to exactly the right width, and the next scene you'll see the amp chassis happily nestled atop our new and properly adjusted stand. Okay, we're in the stand now, and with the instrument panel kind of facing up, we can see just how beat up it is, completely unlike the rest of the metal in the cabinet. Okay, so like I said, I'll check on eBay and other places to see if they make a Silverface Bassman control plate. Looking inside, things look pretty unmolested, actually. See the wire flapping in the breeze here. It's tempting to think that it comes over here to the missing external speaker jack, because it would just reach, but let's not jump to conclusions. We'll figure that out, and we'll have to put on our 3-wire power cord, eliminate that hum switch here where you flip it back and forth, picking your hot wire. You know, we'll replace that diode. It looks like, I don't know how old that capacitor is, might have to replace it. And although I can't show you very well here from this angle, but this pot and these two pots were changed. Okay, so all in all though, I think about as unmolested as you can expect an amp this old to be. So let's get started. Let's replace all the filter caps in the doghouse. Let's figure out where this wire goes. And then let's take a look at the cathode bypass caps and some other places here where the components just are better off being replaced. Okay? Alright, I have removed all of the original and, might I say, thoroughly worn out electrolytic capacitors from their little soldering eyelets. One kind of peculiarity cropped up here, we see 16 microfarads on this one, and there are no 16s anywhere on an AB165 schematic, which just reinforces the idea that they, I think, used the parts they had on hand. And one day when Loopy went over to the bin to grab 8 microfarad caps, they were out, and Leo said, grab a 16. Of course, he was long gone by then. But anyway, here you see it's 8 microfarads right out to the 27K resistor. And we see here the 27K resistor leading right over to a 16. I'll put in, I believe what they sent was a 10 here. We'll put that in. I'm sure it'll work fine. Okay, so let's go ahead and replace these jewels. Every time I use Ruby capacitors, I have to remind myself how they mark the positive and negative ends. Okay, the standard in the industry is there's a dent and a bunch of plus signs on the positive end. Is there any doubt which the positive end is here of this capacitor? And you know it's absolutely critical when you're wiring them in. Let's take a look at the Ruby. Well, let's really screw things up and dent both ends, and then put a bunch of pluses down here at this end. So you're thinking, well, okay, it's probably this end. No, they have a negative here in this sort of a space age symbolism. You see that the minus is in this arrow pointed this way. This is the minus, this is the plus. All the dents, all the plus signs, everything else doesn't matter. Just look at that little weird arrow and see which way it's pointing. That's negative. And before we change both of those 70s at 350, we'll change the strapping resistors here that are hidden, normally hidden in between them. And they're part of our kit. You see we have all 5 of the power supply resistors here in metal film. Excellent. And there's the finished product with all the caps wired in the right polarity with all new metal film resistors. Okay, we put the doghouse lid back on and flip this over and start working on the main circuit. I wanted to share this discovery with you just so you'll double check all the fuses in your own amps. This is supposed to be a 2 amp slow blow fuse, and it looks like it's a 20 amp to me. And you know how dangerous that is. If a dead short pops up in the circuit, a 20 amp fuse isn't going to save anything. You can kiss the transformers goodbye. So let's change this down to the 2 amp it should be, and be sure that in the future we never do anything like this, okay, that we obey the requirements for fuses. I just replaced the external speaker jack and tightened it down with my rocket socket, and now it's time to wire it inside. Well, I have the external speaker jack and the internal or cabinet speaker jack properly wired now. You can see the 2 secondary outputs here from the output transformer. The black wire down here carries the signal to the main leaf of each of those jacks. So if you've got your cabinet speaker plugged in here, the signal will go to the cabinet speakers. If you have external speaker plugged in here, the signal will go to the external speakers. The other output is the green wire here, which is grounded to the shielding lug on each of those output jacks. Now, that mysterious yellow wire that was flapping in the breeze did indeed go to the external speaker jack. Let me show you where it is. It's right here. It's this wire. You see it leaves, that's the signal output from the output transformer. That's the green wire that's grounded. Here's the black wire. Goes to the external speaker, and then it comes here through a 47K resistor and a 0.1 microfarad cap and feeds right into the grid of the 12AT7 long-tailed pair phase inverter. Thus, that yellow wire is part of the negative feedback loop for the Bassman circuit. The fact that that loop has never been connected in all the time that the current owner of this amp has been in possession of it means he's in for a real surprise when he gets this back, because he's going to get a lot more headroom and clarity and be able to turn the volume up a bit more before things start going haywire. Okay, it must have been a pretty wild and woolly amp without any negative feedback, but now it's been restored. And you can see right here where the wire comes over. Now it's a little deceptive. It goes in that little rabbit hole right there, but it comes down right here and connects to the 47K resistor and the 0.1 microfarad cap, and that cap then connects in here to the phase inverter. Now it's time to upgrade our negative DC bias supply. I'm going to replace that puny little diode down there with a mighty 1N5408 diode, and our kit included a replacement for the 50 microfarad at 50 volt filtering cap. This one is a little stouter. It's 50 microfarads at 100 volts. So let's wire in the electrolytic and the diode, making sure that we observe the polarity. We see that the stripe here is on the right side of the diode and the positive is on the right side of the capacitor. Just compare the two diodes. and think to yourself, which of these would I want to entrust the welfare of my output tubes? All right, we're finished. The positive end of the electrolytic is to the right, as is the band of the diode, and because I knew there'd be lots of squawking if I didn't replace this resistor, there's a new metal film 470 ohm resistor for the power supply. And finally, because that kit included the 5 electrolytic cathode bypass caps, we can replace 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's do that. Well, the 5 electrolytic cathode bypass caps have been replaced with careful attention to their polarity. The negative end is always toward ground, which is right here at the tip of my finger. Next, I replaced the 1500 ohm grid stoppers and the 470 ohm screen resistors on each of the 6L6 sockets using metal film resistors. Now it's time to install a 3-wire chassis grounding power cord with the proper primary winding and bypassing of that polarity switch, and then I think we're ready to plug this jewel in and see what happens. Alright, I have the new 3-wire power cord installed. I use the auxiliary socket here sort of like a terminal strip. I bring the black hot wire from the cord to this terminal, the white return wire to this terminal. Then I connect to the hot wire the blue wire that runs over here to the on-off switch, then through the fuse, and then into one of the 2 primary wires to the power transformer. The other primary wire comes right over here and connects directly to the white return wire from the new power cord. Some people prefer to go through the fuse first and then the on-off switch. I don't. I liked the idea that with the on-off switch first, when it's off, everything's off. Okay, if you have the fuse first and there's a good fuse in it, in the fuse holder, and you were to check the fuse and reach in and grab it, as long as the amp is plugged in, it might not be turned on, but it's plugged in, you can get one heck of a shock. Okay, so I prefer to have the on-off switch first so that everything in here then is not energized. Also, I completely disconnect that polarity switch. Now what I've decided to do, just for fun, because I hate to see a good switch go to waste, is I'm going to use it to switch the negative feedback on and off. Okay, remember the owner wasn't used to negative feedback, so I'm going to let him choose whether he wants to keep on without it or flip the switch and activate the negative feedback. Okay, so that'll be next. Okay, the switchable negative feedback has been installed. You see the yellow wire that originally came up here to the external speaker jack now winds its way over here. I had to add an extension to it, and I used some of the yellow wire that I removed from around the polarity switch, so it's a perfect match and draws no attention to the changed wiring. It goes to one end of that polarity switch, and at the other end it's going to come up here hidden along the inside of and then comes down right here to be connected to the signal wire from the secondary of the output transformer. In other words, the wire, instead of going from here to here, now goes over through the switch and to that spot. Then, just to prevent any uncertainty about what that switch is and what it does, I made a stick-on label here telling you what the switch is and the off and on positions. Well, I've got all the tubes installed, and in the place of that unmarked tube, just to play it safe, I got a genuine 12AT7. The unmarked tube looks exactly like it in every detail, and it Probably is a 12AT7, but for my tests and all, I just want to make absolutely sure that I have the proper tube. I also have the two bias probes in position here in series beneath the two 6L6GC output tubes. So I've got it connected to the shop speaker. Let's pipe in a 500 Hertz tone with our audio frequency generator and see what we hear. Or even better, hear what we see. Okay, the power's been on for about a minute. Let's turn off the standby switch. And not liking what I see here. One of these tubes is not flowing any current. The other is about right, and I'm hearing a 60 cycle hum from the shop speaker. So we've got a problem here. Okay, I really thought this was going to be an easy fix, but I think it may have to do with this tube right here. That's just a ridiculous plate current for a 6L6GC. Let's turn this off right now and take a look at what's going on. Before I take a machete to the circuit, let's try the easy way here to solve this problem and start substituting tubes. This is kind of a mismatched pair of 6L6GCs. They are American, and I know they work. So let's see if the hum persists with them in place. Well, we're getting better plate current. It's still low. And now I'm getting a different type of hum. It's not as bad. And looking at this huge disparity here between plate current and the tubes, something came to mind about push-pull amp circuits, and when the output tubes are balanced, they neutralize the hum. Now, fortunately for this experiment, we have a balance control here which will help us balance the two output tubes. Let me start cranking that until the tubes are well balanced. And the hum goes away. So let that be a lesson, I think, to all of us. When you have a noticeable hum and your output tubes are really not balanced, they're way out like these two were, you're going to get a little bit of hum. Okay, and I have a feeling that these tubes were even further out of balance, and that might have given us that terrible deep hum. Let me put these back in and let's see if we can balance them and get them to be quiet. Sure enough, with the original tubes put back in and balanced very closely using the balance control in this AB165 circuit, the hum is gone. Okay, let's unbalance them and bring it back just to prove our hypothesis. Oh God, yes. There you hear it. And there you don't. That's about the most graphic demonstration I've ever seen of the effect of unbalanced output tubes. Notice that the plate current here is lower than with those the two other tubes that I put in. I'm thinking these two are getting a little long in the tooth, as they say, getting a little old. Cathodes are sort of depleted, but they're nicely balanced. Also, let's see, what have we got here? About maybe 12.5, 13 watts of plate dissipation, which is rather low for GCs. Remember, they can tolerate 70% of 30 watts, which would be 21. So these are way under biased. Okay, and it may well be the tubes themselves that just are not capable of flowing enough current because of their age. So I think the best bet is to go in the house and order a brand new pair of output tubes for this amp. Okay, I'm going to turn off the camera right now, go in and do it. I'll be back in a... And then, as if by magic, the box appears. Let's get it open and get a look at what our new tubes look like. After having some problems with JJ tubes, their quality control just isn't adequate. I've changed over to Tube Amp Doctor tubes. I understand that they are much more carefully checked and that it's very rare to get a bad tube from them. So I'm going to give them a try. Let's get them out of the boxes, get them installed, and let's see how this amp sounds. Here they are, a good looking pair of tubes. I hope they sound as good as they look. And it seems like under the same conditions they both passed exactly 40 milliamps of current, which should suit our purposes quite well. So let's get these babies installed. Alright, we have our new pair of TAD 606 GCs installed with our bias probes in place, and I have the power on. We're going to let the filaments warm up and then we'll take it off standby. I've also got two 12-inch 8-ohm speakers installed for a net impedance of 4 ohms, which is what the output transformer prefers. Let's take it off standby and see what we got here. Well, what do we have? About an extra 5 milliamps. Looks pretty well balanced. I guess the original balance setting works for this set of tubes. I'm not overwhelmed by the plate current. I would have liked to see more like about 40 milliamps or so, 38. But this is a definite improvement. And there's absolutely no hum. So this is what I'm going to go with for our audio testing. Okay, I'm over at the shop speaker just to show you about the hum. You can't even tell that the amp's turned on. Okay, this is by far the quietest it's been. So one more benefit of our new tubes. And our bias calculation comes out to 14.3 watts, which is very conservative. Okay, it's around 50% of max instead of 70. But bear in mind that if the owner wants some early breakup, all he has to do is switch off the negative feedback. Okay, with the negative feedback switched on, however, in this moderate bias, he's going to have miles of a really good clean headroom. And these tubes should last pretty close to forever. Before we get started on the audio demonstration, I also wanted to mention that I replaced both of the coupling capacitors for the 6L6 GCs just to be sure that the bias remains stable. And I found a 0.1 microfarad cap that was microphonic. When you tapped it with the chopstick, a fairly loud sound came through the speakers, which is never good, so I replaced it. Okay, now let's button this up and get ready for Ollie and Jack's big concert. Well, as I was about to put it all back together, another grand discovery. Remember I commented on the looseness of the fabric here on the front? Well, it's not just the fabric that's loose. There are no screws holding that front panel in place. So I guess we're going to have to hunt up for wood screws and properly install this panel so that it can't just fall out in transport. Well, I managed to find some vintage slotted head screws to hold in that front panel, and then a new problem arose. Look at how overly long the Phillips head screws are that are holding the handle. Makes it kind of tough to slide the chassis back in. So I'm going to have to cut these off so that they do not extend down into the cabinet to block the chassis. Also, when they're this long, if they touched a hot wire or something in the amp, I think this could cause one heck of a shock hazard. So let's get rid of those overly long screws. Alright, the screws have been shortened, chassis slid into place, the uninstallable nuts have been installed at the end of the 4 strap screws, new strain relief, and replaced missing tube shield. Now we're ready to put in the back panel, turn it around, and have our audio demonstration. Back panel's in, time to turn it around and get started. Finally, after overcoming countless obstacles, we're ready for our audio demonstration. As usual, we'll have the SM57 microphone on the 12-inch a Jensen speaker in the Ampro cabinet, and we'll have Ollie and Jack play some tunes in the bass channel and in the normal channel, and you'll see close-ups of the control panel to tell you which is which. Then we're going to have a special demonstration of the negative feedback switch. It has tremendous effect in this particular amp, to the degree that any of you with Bassman amps with similar circuits and NFB loops really might consider installing this on-off switch like I did, because I think you're going to really be impressed. I'll leave that up to you all. Okay, here we go. guess that's about it for this video on the mighty 1973 Fender Bassman with an AB165 circuit. I hope you enjoyed it and saw some tips, particularly on that switchable negative feedback circuit. Okay, I want to take this opportunity to thank all my Patreon patrons and PayPal contributors for keeping us on the air and advertising free. Should you choose to join them in supporting our channel, please see the links in the video description. Also, and I hate to be a nag, but would you please double check to be sure that you are subscribed? About 50% of the commenters are not subscribed to our channel. I think a lot of you think you are, but you aren't. So please help us out and double check and subscribe if you haven't already. Now it's time to announce our second feature. The geology excursion in the last video went over so well. We're going to take an aerial trip now to some big red sand dunes that are east of town here. I'll be using a drone, and it's going to have special background music that was provided by one of our viewers named Jim Suber. I hope you enjoy it and that you will join us for future videos. Thanks so much. See you then.